Okay, let's give this a go. Hi everyone, my name is Emi and I'm joined by the painter here today because we are going to discuss a very exciting topic, DAOs and decentralized decision making, and have the pleasure to host some of the longest standing projects, some brilliant minds from our industry who are going to discuss why on-chain governance is necessary. We will talk about voting mechanisms. We will talk about some of the pros and cons of various governance models. And when we were preparing to this call, it occurred to me that basically we are contemplating, and the guests here are contemplating about questions what Plato and Socrates was contemplating a couple of 100 years ago. It's just what the difference is that blockchain tech is involved, and very excited about this conversation. Just briefly to my person, my name is Emi, and I have the pleasure to be on the board of this digital global association, the Crypto Valley Association, and also have the pleasure of being on the council of B Protocol. And in my day job, I work for Ledger Enterprise Solutions, which is the B2B arm of Ledger, the security company. Let's dive in. And my first question is to everyone, to these fantastic guests, is to please introduce yourself, say your name, what or where your passion lies, and maybe a few sentences about the project, what you're representing today. Mark, you want to go first?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So yeah, my name is Mark Richardson. Until recently, I was a research scientist for the Australian government, and I made the transition into DeFi after proposing a leverage system that can be used on Bancor that we now call the Bancor Vortex. Shortly after publishing that, I received a call from one of the Bancor founders and was offered a job, and I now work for Bancor full time. My passion really is more of the same, I would say. It's about finding really creative ways to make markets more efficient and to make DeFi participants more active, right? To get them more interested in using these products and to make money doing it. That's kind of what my personal interests are. But Bancor in general is much more fundamental. It is a decentralized exchange, and its mission in a way is to create continuous liquidity for DeFi assets. And this is especially important for new projects that are launching new tokens, where getting listings on things like Coinbase or Binance might be further down the track. Bancor basically gives them a way to have their assets be liquid and present in DeFi in a meaningful way.
Thank you so much. Bill, you want to go next?
Sure. My name is Bill Laboon. I'm the technical education lead at the Web3 Foundation here in Zug, Switzerland, which means that my job is to teach people about Polkadot and the related ecosystems. So things like Kusama and our framework for building blockchain substrate. So as my title might suggest, as the education lead, my passion really is about teaching people about blockchain. So before I came to here, I was a lecturer in the computer science department at the University of Pittsburgh for 5 years, where I taught a blockchain course. I reviewed papers for Ledger, the academic journal of blockchain. Here I work on teaching people, writing tutorials, giving presentations like this one, and videos and explaining how Polkadot works. So if you haven't heard about Polkadot, it's a project that what we call a layer 0 blockchain. It allows people to develop their own blockchains using this substrate framework that can connect to our relay chain. But these blockchains can be developed any way you like. So if you want to have particular features or not have particular features in them, perhaps use different cryptography or have new kind of instead of using the EVM, use some other virtual machine or some other language for your smart contracts, then you can develop your own blockchain and yet share in the security and interoperate with the rest of the blockchains in the Polkadot ecosystem.
Thank you, Bill. Cyrus, I see some voting is going on there in the background.
Yeah, exactly. Direct democracy, it's full speed, right? Well, big fan of exactly both those topics we just mentioned, which is DeFi and bringing new infrastructure layers of protocols such as Polkadot to change the game. I'm the founder of SwissBorg. SwissBorg essentially, we're born out of an ICO in 2017, 2018 out of Switzerland. Our mission is to democratize wealth management by making it fun, fair, and community-centric. And yeah, I mean, it's been a great time to be in crypto for the last 4 years. Even more today than yesterday, and probably even better after tomorrow. And I think so. This panel comes to the main one of the most fascinating topics, which I believe is to essentially bring governance into what we're doing, because we're all playing this game, which is living in this beautiful planet, and there's different theories, and today these theories could be applied with blockchain rules and with a great community that could eventually decentralize nations. So happy to be with you guys.
Thank you for the round of intros. So Bill, the first question is to you. And Polkadot has been rumbling the past weeks. We are getting closer to the parachain launch, Complimenti here. What's the point of governance, and why do we need it? If you could elaborate on this question a bit.
Yeah, sure. So I think something to keep in mind is that even though when people talk about blockchain governance, often what they mean is on-chain governance, but any system with more than a single person involved is going to have some sort of governance. There has to be some way to make decisions about the future of the protocol. And so you see in a lot of these, like generation 1 blockchains, that there is a form of governance, but it's often sort of informal, ad hoc. It was developed over time and without strict rules. And there are certain benefits to doing something like that, right? Evolution as opposed to sort of centralized planning. But on the other hand, there are a lot of drawbacks to that. And so we see that often trying to direct the future, where the blockchain is going to go into the future, what features are wanted. It's something that's kind of monopolized by the developers or a very small group of people. And so by having on-chain governance, by having basically the users of the network can help to decide where the network is going, then we think this is a bit fairer and more transparent. That anyone can see what happened, how many people agree on it, what is the right way forward. That doesn't always mean they're going to make the right decision, because there's no perfect solution, right, for how to govern things. But by putting decisions on the blockchain, right, we can see, all right, who is deciding on this, what percentage of people. This helps avoid disputes. It helps avoid hard forks, which again, you can argue whether or not they're good or bad. But they do allow a sort of like unifying force, right? Because just like in the real world, right, by having government, you can have people that disagree, but you have some solution for determining what the way is forward, for people to move forward as a group, even if there are disagreements.
Thank you very much for that. And in the meanwhile, dear audience, welcome. So nice that you're here. Please throw in questions if you have as we go. We will take that at the halftime and also at the end. So my next question is to Mark. And Bancor is a very transformative monetary force in the world, and we have seen some exciting developments. Bancor Vortex is out. BNT was surging the past weeks. Maybe just briefly, if you could say why BNT surged. This is not the governance question. The governance question comes after then. That relating, how do you move from a trustless system like Ethereum to a decentralized system like Snapshot, for instance? And please also familiarize those who are not who don't know what snapshot is, with what snapshot is. Thank you, Mark. So many questions, I know.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, that's okay. Let me, I'll start at the beginning. So yes, BNT, which is the Bancor network token, has recently appreciated in price quite some way. I think back in the end of last year, it was somewhere, towards October of last year, it was hovering around 50 cents. It recently broke $9 and has retraced a little bit since then. Part of the reason why I think we saw such a surge in the token price is that the protocol has gained traction very, very quickly. So when I first joined the DAO, I think we had something like $50 million in liquidity. And we're now, we've recently breached $1.6 billion in liquidity. So clearly the protocol is attracting the user base that it was designed to attract. And that is driving demand for the token. And that's why its price is appreciating the way it is. One of the reasons why I think we're starting to attract liquidity providers so quickly is that Bancor allows people to provide liquidity as a single asset, whereas most of our competitors require liquidity providers to provide two different assets. And so this single-sided exposure is extremely attractive to a lot of people in DeFi because they usually they have a specific token that is their favorite, it's very close to their heart, and they would prefer not having to sell half of that to buy something else. And so Bancor sort of gives them a way out of having to do that. The other thing that Bancor has achieved is that it has removed an omnipresent force in DeFi that we call impermanent loss. And I don't have time probably to explain it on this call exactly as to how that works, but it works something like an option straddle if members of the audience are familiar with how that works. But basically, as the price of these two assets starts to deviate, market participants called arbitrageurs are able to extract value from your position over time. And so this has been a major bottleneck, I think, for getting people involved in liquidity provision. And Bancor has managed to move that risk off of liquidity providers and back onto the monetary policy of the protocol. And so this means that that participants in the Bancor network are basically free of that risk now. And that means TVL has been spiking and demand for the token has been spiking, and it's been a really, really terrific ride, honestly. So for the next part, which was you've commented that we're moving our governance structure off of Ethereum and onto Snapshot. This is, so let's just talk about the advantages of Ethereum for a moment. Ethereum has this outstanding security, which is that at any time, any activity on the blockchain can be verified by anyone. And that makes it highly trustworthy. The problem with voting on Ethereum, though, is that unless you own a significant amount of capital, participating in governance can be pretty expensive. When the gas rates are hovering around, between 150 and 300, most of our community members were forced to pay about $50 every time they cast the vote. And we vote about twice a week because there's so much to monitor on Bancor. So with Ethereum, it's like you get this really terrific security from its technological decentralization, but the actual people making decisions are limited to people with the capital to do so. So the actual decision-making part of it was highly centralized, and that can't be tolerated. So Snapshot basically trades those in the other direction. Snapshot is an off-chain server that records people's votes on a centralized server. And because it doesn't use the Ethereum consensus mechanism, there's no gas cost associated with it. And so this means that people with a small amount of capital on our platform will be able to have a voice in governance, whereas previously they wouldn't have been able to do that. And so here we're really trading the decentralization security situation that we have on Ethereum for the decentralized decision-making of Snapshot. But maybe we can talk a little bit later about specifically how we are integrating that, because there is a way to do this in a highly secure way. But that's currently what's happening without DAO. It's a pretty profound transformation. I'm really excited to see more community involvement in future DAO decisions.
Thanks, Mark. And for those of you who don't know much about impermanent losses, Mark has a fantastic YouTube channel, Mark Richardson. You can just follow that and subscribe. So Cyrus, kudos on the 2 billion transaction volume to date. It's crypto summer, so it's so nice to congratulate to all of you guys on these fantastic achievements. Basically, when we were prepping for this call, we were talking about direct democracy. And why is direct democracy important in your book, and how is SwissBorg empowering its users?
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, it really is crypto summer or spring or whatever it is, but it's doing great. There's so tremendously. We launched our wealth app just like a year ago. It's our anniversary actually today. And we already have 285,000 verified users, more than 100,000 active users every day, over 1 billion on the platform. Our SwissBorg token has 9,000% year to date. Anyway, it's been a fantastic year for crypto, for SwissBorg, for DeFi, for new protocols. I think so as well. It's been there's so much and to congratulate here. I think so. The main thing is that while we're creating this new infrastructure and this new way of interacting with people, and how do you really believe that this is going to be successful or not? Is if people put trust and faith in it. And people could only put trust if the technology is reliable. But they could only put faith if they are allowed to essentially participate in the decision making. And that's what it is. Everyone in the world wants to have that little green, paper, that red paper, and say, I was the person who potentially made that decision. And that decision led to create this initiative that was voted, and that is voted, make this and this and that. And I think so that's what we're all supposed to do, is consensually find great opportunities for the world, not for people, but for the world, and accelerate that transition. And I think so blockchain has been through Bitcoin one way where people are able to transact freely with having ownership and all of that, but the governance part is something fundamental. So right after our ICO, that was late 2017, early 2018, we raised our hard cap, amazing, like other different projects. And then crypto winter, really wrecked us like most people. And we want to have a real use case of our token very quickly. So we said, what is the thing that most important? Well, it's giving that direct voting power. And very similar to what happens in Switzerland, we said okay, let's make them vote on one subject. And the subject was our wealth. Is it going to be desktop based, so what I wanted, or is it going to be mobile based, what the co-founder Anthony wanted? And we asked everyone around our community to vote. Not everyone voted, Mark. I think so you did take a point that's very valid, which means that in order to vote, you had to spend some gas. And for those who participate in ICO with $10, well, it was probably not worth for them for voting. And how did we do this? We just said, okay, back then, early 2018, how can we do it? Okay, well, let's mint these new tokens, and everyone who has 10 CHSB, so 10 SwissBorg tokens, will receive 10 RSB, referendum SwissBorg tokens. Then we'll just create 2 wallets, and we'll say, okay, one wallet is going to vote for essentially the wealth app on the mobile version, and the other one for the desktop. It was as easy as that. Back then, there was not so much frameworks. Polkadot didn't exist, and essentially, it was not that hard. So we did have 9,000 people that participated in that referendum, which is a very big amount of number for as we see in a lot of DeFi projects, there's not so many voting people that vote. And by the end, the mobile version won 50.5% versus 49.5%. So the mobile version did win, and now people are fortunate to essentially be able to say I chose the mobile app. And even better, I remember a guy working at SwissBorg, he applied for the mobile iOS team. And he said, and he came and and during the interview, I'm like, why do you want to come? What's your purpose in life? And why do you want to work for SwissBorg? So my personal life is this and that. And why I want to come for SwissBorg, because I chose to develop the mobile app and now I'm going to do it. And I thought that that is exactly what you want. It's those stories that people dream about, take initiatives, vote then, and then we make it happen. And that's the power of, I think, self-governance. And that's why it's profoundly very important at SwissBorg.
I'm sorry you didn't get the desktop app, Cyrus.
Yeah, I know. Well, that's it, but it doesn't matter. Maybe one day, we'll have one, maybe not.
Cool. Thanks for sharing that little anecdote. And this is exactly what I wanted to ask Bill, that it would be interesting to hear your take on how we are providing fair representation also to those who are not participating in the voting.
Yeah, I mean, that's a real problem. Again, in normal governance, right, real world governance as well, you have a large percentage of people who, given the opportunity, won't vote because there's always some cost to voting. It doesn't have to be gas fees, although those can be substantial, but just like time and again, in the real world, going to the polling place, et cetera. So you see, actually, again, even in real world voting, you never see 100% turnout in reality, barring dictatorships. And so there are some solutions to this. Some, like I think in Australia, you're fined if you don't vote. That's certainly something you could implement somehow if you don't vote. But you also ask, is that the type of person you want voting on a blockchain, someone that's only doing it to avoid getting the equivalent of slashed, right? So we look, when you look at blockchains, voting tends to be very, very low turnout rates. So on Polkadot, the average turnout for a referendum is less than 1%. So we did see, there was one very contentious vote this summer where turnout was at 31%, and that was a huge outlier, like orders of magnitude greater, or I guess order and a half of magnitude more than we ever have seen before. So you have like a huge chunk of holders of a token that are not going to be again, paying the transaction fees and it's paying attention to all of the details of what's happening. So yeah, so the question is, how can you make sure that their voice is heard? And so what Polkadot has done is on its relay chain, so the individual, what we call parachains, these separate blockchains can have their own voting mechanisms. But for the relay chain is we've added a few features to help make sure that passive stakeholders are represented as well. So the first is the Polka Dot Council, which has some very strict limited powers, but powers nonetheless, that you can vote for them. Any user can put their dot behind individuals, like individual accounts that are running for the council to have these specific powers. Some of these people are well known in the Polkadot community, and some are pseudonymous. So we actually have some counselors that are pseudonymous, but they take part in all of the council votes, et cetera. So this is a way that we represent the passive stakeholders. We also have a technical committee that has, again, very limited powers, but they can make referenda pass more quickly. So if you're voting on something, they can adjust the timing if they think that from a technical perspective, it's necessary. So that's really how we're helping to represent these passive stakeholders. It's very easy to vote for council members. It's sort of set it and forget it. For every election, you'll keep voting for the same people, so you don't need to come online and keep voting every day or anything like that, or every month even. You can just do it forever. So that helps us provide some representation for the passive stakeholders. And in order to allow some fairness for minority interests as well, because you can imagine if I have 50% plus one of all dot, then maybe I'll vote to just give me all of the dot or something like that. Is that you actually can adjust the weight of your vote by locking your token. So you can lock for up to like 6 times your voting power, but then your your DOT, your tokens are stuck there. So this allows someone that has like, if they really believe in a particular referendum, they want it to pass, they actually can give themselves more power simply by locking up this. And this lock, you're locking up their tokens. And this lock actually does not take place if the vote goes against you. So if you really believe that we should not upgrade to this next runtime, for instance, it has some feature we really don't want, and you vote, you have what's called 6x conviction, so your worth, your weight is 6 times what it normally is, but the vote goes against you, then that lock is eliminated. So if you want to get out of the ecosystem, if you believe strongly enough that it's going down the wrong path, then you have done what you could, but you are then free to leave. And we obviously don't want people to leave the ecosystem, but we think having it in this way is one of the ways we help prevent contentious forks, right? That if you don't want to be a part of it, that you're not going to be locked into the system. So again, there's never any perfect solution, and protecting minority interests is something that is really difficult, and a lot is sort of handled by cultural norms, both in blockchain and elsewhere. But we've really tried to have some ways to make sure that the majority doesn't just run rampant over a minority in Polkadot.
Thanks so much, Bill, for that. We have some exciting questions from the audience. For instance, DJ Cool. Before we take that, I have a question to you, Mark. If you could tell us a bit more about vote delegation, when you can delegate per authority, but also per vote delegation.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think this was touched on a couple of times by Bill and Cyrus separately. But the way that we run governance on Bancor is, it's probably slightly different to Polkadot and some of these other chains, because a lot of what we have to make decisions on is really about sort of core economic policies, right? And so a lot of it is quite complicated, and if you don't understand what's going on, you could easily make a bad decision, which is why governance on Bancor is opt-in, right? Just because you have a stake on the platform doesn't necessarily mean you're being forced to vote. There are no penalties for not voting. So there are competing models like Kyber, for example. If you have your Kyber token staked in their system, in order to receive the revenue from the platform, you actually need to participate in voting. So Bancor doesn't do that. It's completely opt-in. There's no rewards for voting. In terms of vote delegation, this would be a system where you can have a stake in the platform and you want your vote to count, but you are kind of entrusting someone with the decision for you, right? It's kind of like electing a local representative to voice your concerns in Parliament or something like that. So that would be a per vote delegation, and this could be simple. You just attach your vote to their address, and then that person who is receiving the delegation from you would then have would control their vote plus all the votes delegated to them. In terms of delegation of authority, this is exactly what we're doing with Snapshot. So I mentioned in my answer previously that the way that we're implementing Snapshot is slightly different, I think, to how other DAOs have managed it. And that is that the authority of Ethereum, the on-chain system that we have there, is always absolute. So if anyone was to ever gain control of Snapshot or compromise that system, an on-chain vote to remove authority from Snapshot can be done at any time. And so this would be akin to, for example, a governor general sacking a prime minister, or it could also be seen as like the crown deposing a leader. And so this gives the DAO the confidence that no matter what happens on Snapshot, if someone, a hacker or something, gets control of that system, they will never actually gain control of voting authority. Because as soon as we detect it, the DAO will simply withdraw from Snapshot using an Ethereum on-chain vote.
Thanks so much, Mark. So let's take to mix up the order a bit, let's take Maria's question. To allow for minority involvement, are you limiting the weight that whales can have on the governance system? I'm sorry. Who wants to take this?
So can you repeat the question? You broke up a little bit for me just now.
To allow for minority involvement, are you limiting the weight that whales can have on the governance system?
Yeah, super informed question. This is something that I take very, very seriously. We have struggled before with, very large Bancor participants having at any one stage, a controlling vote. So there are a couple of things that Bancor did to overcome this. One is that we introduced a supermajority rule. So this is super common in traditional finance. So for if you're a shareholder, for example, in Tesla or something, and they're proposing a merger with another company, it's not uncommon in those situations to have something like a 95% supermajority rule. And so this means that if you control, as Bill said, 51% of the vote, it won't help you. You need to get to a very, very high majority. And so in Bancor, we're using a 2/3 majority rule, which, because of the how distributed Bancor is, being able to control 66% of the vote on governance is essentially impossible. So this helps to water down the effect of whale votes. The other thing that we have is very high quorum requirements. So for routine maintenance of the protocol, there's only something like a 20% quorum requirement. But for token listings, which is the most severe security threat that the protocol faces, this has a 40% quorum requirement. So if anyone is deliberately trying to subvert governance, they have all of their work ahead of them. It's really, really difficult to do. But there's another thing that has entered into the discussion recently, which is what it has, I can't remember if it was coined somewhere else, but it's been called quadratic voting. And so this would be basically that the voting power you have is always the square root of the tokens that you own. And so this means to double your voting power, you need to square the number of tokens. So this would mean that on the lower tiers, the amount of vote that you get per token is much, much higher than when people own, multi-million-dollar stakes on the protocol. And so this does help to even it out a little bit. The problem is that it's gameable. So if you were a person in one of these positions, you could easily transfer your tokens between different wallets. It's not perfect, but there may be something like this that we could implement to make sure that the ultra wealthy in the world don't control DAOs into the future. So that there's a lot of things being done: supermajority, high quorum requirements, and then something like a quadratic voting system. But the best way to get these answers and help us develop it is to actually get involved with these community projects and help us think of a better way that it can be done.
Yeah, I just want to extend off of what Mark said a bit there, because like you said, unless we have some sort of decentralized identity system running on top, then quadratic voting, or really a lot of this gaming that of whales can do, it's really hard to avoid, right? So Polkadot also has a few anti-whale, I guess you could say, features. So one is, instead of having a quorum, we have something called adaptive quorum biasing, where basically the lower the turnout, the harder it is to pass something. So for instance, if there is 2% turnout, then I don't know the equation off the top of my head, but it's around 95% would have to vote in favor of something to make it pass. You're biased towards failing. Whereas if 100% of if everyone voted, then it would be just 50% plus one. So this helps prevent some whale that has whatever 2% of all dot or something to come in, make a vote when over Christmas when not many people are paying attention, and be able to get 50% plus of the voting. The second thing is sort of a last ditch thing, is that there is always a delay between when a vote passes and when it's executed. And with supermajority support from the council, which remember is represents the interests of the passive stakeholders, it can be vetoed. So that proposal can be canceled. So there's always sort of a lowercase c conservative bias right, of change, these major changes to the protocol. It should be difficult, and this helps to make sure that you don't have one whale who is doing something, or some cabal who is doing something that would be negative for the rest of the network.
Thanks for chiming in there,
Wanna-
Will. We have DJ Cool in the house who actually asked 2 questions. I'm going to take one now to answer live. So what's actually new in off-chain governance systems? Why are crypto projects not innovating with off-chain governance and prefer to revert to hierarchy in the real world?
Yeah, I think so. That's a very good point, actually, because it remembers our second referendum. Our second referendum was about like what investment theme that we would like to start first. And on-chain governance is not always the best thing. Everyone does believe it's not. It's definitely not. Because I'll tell you a very clear example. There was 5 different investment themes, right? And 5 different addresses to send these different wallets to these different tokens to vote. And what happened is we sent this out. We had back then a lot of Asian community, so they went directly into 2 different themes because they were probably at the time they finished work and people in Europe came after, right? So we sent this like it was at noon. So a lot of people voted directly for gaming and for another theme, which I don't remember. And then as we say this process that was on chain, people were not looking then towards voting. They were trying to choose the less the thing that they hated the less, right? So if it was A, B, C, D, E, and F, in an average thing, you would probably have seen a lot of A, a little B, a lot of C instead of D, and would be pretty much equilibrium. In this case, we saw that the first votes essentially determined if it was going to be A or D. And the others like C or E or F, just people didn't vote for it because they felt that as there's very low chances and you're seeing all this transparency, it's not always the best outcome. So, what we thought is that how can we process a mix of combination between the 2, which to be honest, we have it on paper. We still haven't applied it into any product yet. But it's true that there's that issue, and then the second issue that I think so that Mark and Bill was really saying very well is that you don't want big whales to just take the big decision, because if not, the democracy is not really working very well. So we tried to think about double votation. Whatever we're doing at SwissBorg, we're just pretty much copy pasting what the Swiss democracy has done, right? We're not trying to reinvent the role. We're just trying to make it like faster and better and hopefully universal. And I think so that's a little bit what we're trying to play, is how to have a double votation. So based on stake, but based as well on the number of voters. That's one way. And what we thought as well is that right now, so I think so tomorrow at 11 o'clock, we are electing our parliament. So Switzerland is divided into 3 different main big chambers. There's the government, the federal council, essentially. There's then the parliament, which is essentially a mix between state of canton, cantonal states, right? And then it's as well the national council. And the last but not least is the judiciary. And we elected obviously the government, which is SwissBorg, essentially employees that have to do the work. And the National Council, we thought about how can we create a parliament where essentially it would represent the best token holders. So the first way we said it, out of the 200, we say we'll take the top 50 biggest stakers. That's good because we know that they're gonna fight for the SwissBorg token, that's for sure. But if we took only these guys, it would not represent essentially our community, because if it's only based on staking, I believe you're gonna get to a moment that you're probably not gonna favor the entire ecosystem, but only the early comers, which is great, but probably not the best outcome. So, because then you essentially get less decentralized, and then you just recreate a centralized system. So what we thought is that, okay, where do we put the most heart and love in SwissBorg? Well, it's in the Wealth app, it's in the community app, which is a game, and the DAO itself. So we're trying to essentially get not only based on staking, but based on actually how much work, how much dedication, how many points do you earn in these different games, or how many missions that you take in the DO, and to make sure that we combine and we elect essentially the National Council that reflects the whole entire chain of our community members, and not only based on stake. And the idea behind after it's essentially is to pass initiatives like in Switzerland, then vote for those initiatives, and then obviously it's our job to make them happen. And that could be the decisions on token listing, similar to Bancor, I presume, on new premium tiers, on whatever we want to develop in the future as utilities for the token and things like that. And that's how we're trying to play an on-chain, off-chain, and hopefully we'll find out a way. And tomorrow we're electing these guys, so we'll see how it goes.
Fantastic. There is a SwissBorg question from Quentin. If you want to type the answer there, I'm not going to take that live. I will quickly we will take the question of Tim. Would Bancor considering voting on converting its governance to quadratic voting, or would it simply implement quadratic voting without the DAOs' opinion on it? And then I have 3 more questions to you guys. So let's answer this quickly. Mark, please.
Yeah, all changes to the Bancor protocol require a DAO decision. So it's something that absolutely would require a proposal, and that proposal would need to be voted on. It would, in this case, be subject to a 20% quorum and a 66.7% supermajority. I assume the reason you're asking it is because there's an obvious, the elephant in the room is that the whales that control the majority of the vote have an incentive to vote it down, and that makes the proposal more difficult to pass. But we already know that doesn't happen. In fact, some of the biggest whales in Bancor are the most pro-democracy. We left the snapshot vote live for 3 days, and mostly to see how the community was going to vote for it. And we had one of the largest turnouts, with people voting with very small amounts for the very first time to sort of show their support for it. And even though it was already over the line, there were some last minute whale votes in favor of it, making sure that we actually do go on to snapshot. So I think that it's a myth that the whales in DeFi and in DAOs enjoy the centralization of power that they have. I think that they know that that's a weakness of the system, and it's in their best interest for the protocol overall to make sure that there's a greater level of participation. So if we did go to quadratic voting, I actually don't think that it would struggle to pass. The reason we haven't got a proposal for it yet is, as I discussed with Bill, it's not the best system because it's easy to skirt around it. So if there was a nefarious influence that did want a controlling vote, and I don't think that we have any of those influences right now, but certainly it's a threat that exists and we need to prepare for it. Quadratic voting isn't the best way to get around it. But yeah, anything that takes the power away from the whales, generally the whales are extremely in favor of, which is a delightful realization.
Thank you so much. So I have a question for you, Cyrus. Basically, how could NFTs play a great role in governance? When we were prepping for this call, you were sharing your 2 cents. If you could share with the audience.
Yeah, I think so. NFTs, obviously, everyone talk about as a piece of art, or, if you ask my friends at Engine, you're going to say it's the revolution of video games and collectibles and whatsoever. And I definitely believe that's true. I do believe that NFTs could be like essentially accomplishment of a smart ID, right? Whatever you do on the chain, or whatever you do on even a centralized platforms, we could then like pass over and say like this person is has these different rights. Like, I don't know, let's say you do KYC at SwissBorg, right? And you go through the 3 different levels, because we have different levels, we're regulated. So if you go to the 3rd level, that means you're high net worth individuals. And it's the standards of European and Switzerland. We really go through the both. So that means essentially you're an accredited investor, right? So what if now SwissBorg, we say like, hey, this guy is a accredited investor, he has a wallet, we create an NFT, and we tell to essentially, we send an NFT to this person. The person keeps it in his wallet, and then if he or she wants to go, I don't know, on another platform, let's go, he wants to go to Bitpanda or whatsoever, he or she then doesn't essentially need to do KYC, or doesn't need to at least approve he's not an institutional investor, right? And I think so. That is the beginning of a reflection of how NFTs essentially could be a way of creating a digital ID with credit scores, with behaviors that could be really, bring more trusts. And, I don't know if you've been yield farming for ages at Aave, maybe you get a special thing that therefore you're going to go on to, I don't know, a new protocol of lending, and that'll enable you at Polkadot to be a super farmer as well, because you've been, granted that you've done great things for a long time. And I think so that could open a lot of chapters of essentially on-chain and off-chain collaboration. And it's been now a year and a half. We talked about this at SwissBorg. We haven't implemented yet because obviously the roadmap is always very difficult to keep up with all the brilliant ideas. That comes from our community. But yeah, I think so that could really be something that we could eventually really plug and potentially play and collaborate. Therefore, between Bancor, yeah, like Bancor and SwissBorg, that could be like something we could look at, right? And yeah, I think so. It could potentially change a lot our interactions between projects.
Thanks for elaborating on that, Cyrus, and hinting some ideas there. So before we take this is one of my favorite questions, which is coming up, which is what are some of the pros and cons of Polkadot and Bancor's governance? But I see that the questions are gaining momentum, or I think more and more questions are coming, and I really love Aaron's question, which is, and I think this is for Bill, and yeah, because we don't have much time, I just want to be mindful of that. So since blockchain solutions and DAOs are undertaking age-old questions around decision-making and governance, are we about to see a renaissance in this area? If so, what are the top aspects of decentralized governance you would like to see as a result of this renaissance?
Wow, that is a really good question. I'm afraid, I can't see the future, so I don't know what will happen, but I will say what I'm interested in seeing happen. So one, there have been a lot of really interesting ideas put out in political science on what is the right way to run a country. And I think if you look back in history, a lot of the constrictions of a government often were just from weren't constrictions in the political philosophy, but more constrictions in what can be done, right, in terms of communication. So the reason you have monarchies, right? Well, it's really easy, just have this one person is in charge. Decentralized, things like Switzerland, decentralization in some sense was, well, if I'm a central power, I don't have to worry too much about these outlying areas. And so I think what we can see is these more complex approaches to governance that actually would work on a blockchain, since all of the data is there to be visualized. Now, computing things and how is difficult still, and coming to consensus is difficult. But we can see things like we already see weighted voting. There's no reason that we couldn't have weighted voting in a regular voting system like in the United States or something, but it'd be very difficult to implement from an engineering perspective. Rule by prediction markets, right? This is certainly something that it is physically possible, but it's just so difficult to do in the real world that it just would be and just very different, right, from what's been done, that I think you're not going to see it done in a physical government anytime soon. But I think that the two things that blockchain governance gives you is, one, these more complicated systems that, again, have been discussed, and talked about, but rarely implemented in these real world systems. Just an example from Polkadot, the fragment algorithm, which was used in like Swedish elections in the late 1800s, but it just took forever to do, even for 20 people. It's something that can be done, right? Even with thousands of people nominating on Polkadot. And so we see it happening, and it has a lot of additional like cool factors that help representation. The second thing is, so one, I think like these more complicated systems can actually exist. The second thing is that I think because there's not so much of a weight of tradition here, and I'm not saying tradition is a bad thing. Obviously, there are a lot of good things that these systems have evolved. There's going to, I see a sort of Cambrian explosion, right? As different blockchains try different things, and they're willing to do it. If you're a small blockchain with whatever, a few hundred users and a few $1 million market cap, that's very different than changing the governance of a nation state. And so because of that, I think you're going to see a lot of interesting experiments and a lot of these things, again, that were discussed in political science textbooks, but never actually implemented. We're starting to see this. And I think we're just going to see more of it. And I'm really looking forward to see which teams think which features are interesting to add for governance going forward.
One of the things sorry.
Mark, go ahead. I'm just saying, wow, so much enthusiasm. It's coming through the screen. So cool. Mark, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I think one of the really innovative things that's being done right now is the idea of continuous vote delegation. So, currently, if you think about how traditional governments are run, as a voter, you never really have the ability to be an agent in decisions very frequently. Mostly, you have like local elections, to represent your area, and then they basically speak to the next rung up in the governance structure, all the way up until the federal, up to the federal level. But when you vote that person in, you're basically trusting that they're going to, deliver on the values that they campaigned on. And the world over, we're used to the idea that people can say whatever they want to get votes, and then do something else entirely once they get into power. With an active vote delegation system like we're considering for Bancor, and that's already being investigated by other projects. As soon as someone doesn't vote the way that you wanted them to, you can change your delegation to someone else. And this means that on a per decision basis, we get to elect leaders that are actually making decisions that people agree with. So I think this idea of completely getting away from a term-based system where you have someone that's basically elected on a promise and then given however many years to do whatever they want and not be held accountable for not delivering on what they said that they would do. What we're considering for DeFi is actually answering some of the problems that governance faces in general, which is just the process of it. And so being able to use something like a blockchain technology to constantly and in real time move power around in terms of decision making, I think is one of the things that is likely to gain traction, certainly within DeFi, but could also start bleeding over into actual real world decisions, because there's an accountability there that the current electoral systems of the world don't really have.
Okay, because we don't have so much time, and maybe we are going 10 minutes over anyways, because we have fantastic questions. How about we just focus on the positives here, and each of you is going to highlight the major positive of your governance model. Bill, you want to go first, or Cyrus?
Go for it, Bill, please.
Okay. All right. I certainly could talk positives and negatives, but I'll say one of the really cool things about Polkadot's governance model is based on the way that Polkadot is structured. So the entire Polkadot relay chain runtime, all the rules of the blockchain are held in a WebAssembly blob. And so anything about the system can be changed, right? All the way down to upgrading the code. So you can make the referenda can be on very small things, such as changing the number of validators in the active set, or it could be, I'm going to change the entire rules of the system without hard forking, because I just update this WebAssembly blob, this blob of bytecode that defines all the rules. So I can make any change that I want to, and that's how we have done now 29 runtime upgrades on the Polkadot mainnet. Just again, all through governance, it's always been voted on, that people have decided, like, yes, this is the code I want to add to it. So I will leave it as an exercise for the reader as to the negatives of that, but I think it provides a lot of really cool benefits and like capabilities for going forward and being very flexible.
Thank you, Mark. There's Cyrus. Who goes next?
You can take it, Cyrus.
I'll go for it. Yeah. Yeah, I think so for sure, by the way, and I'm really big fan of Polkadot, by the way, for the governance system. I think so for us, it's going to be a new breed, right? We just had this popular referendums in 2018, and now it's going to be how these new national council are going to, talk together and create these initiatives. But I think so it's great because, again, it's, it just the same idea again is how you could really entice people to collaborate on multiple different subjects. It's not only about the voting, it's as well proposing these initiatives prior to the voting, right? And then prioritizing these initiatives to see which are the ones we're going to vote for. So I think so that is a lot to do, and yeah, I'm really very optimistic about it because at the end, as I said earlier, it's you could only trust technology, but if you want to have faith in something, it's something you usually have. You feel like it's really important, or you want to be part of it. And now it's not being part of it; it's actually making the part. And that's why I'm confident if we replicate what Switzerland has been doing, the only democracy around the world for the last 500 years, well, we have a very big chance of making a great impact here.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I'll take the last word, so to speak. I think my favorite part of Bancor governance is that you don't have to be a stakeholder to participate. Out of necessity, we are constantly collaborating with new token projects, existing token communities who are interested in getting their tokens listed on Bancor because they want to provide liquidity both to support the use case of their project, but also because they have been heartbroken by impermanent loss on other exchanges. And so we don't just we don't ask them to step aside and let Bancor token holders take care of things. They are invited into our Telegram channels. They can author and publish proposals on our governance pages. And even though the actual decision-making comes back down to BNT holders at the end of the day, it's still an open, collaborative environment, right? It's not a black box Citadel type situation where that's completely insulated from the rest of the environment. I think that this is extremely important because DeFi is a sort of collaborative space, and Bancor does have lots of projects on its platform. And I want these token communities to get involved because, in a sense, they are also entrusting their assets with the code that Bancor has deployed on Ethereum. So that's the part I really like about it. It's not it's not a closed cell where we just have conversations with each other, but it's this messy, chaotic at sometimes, but at the end of the day, getting stuff done quickly, sort of way of making decisions and having conversations. I really like that about how the Bancor DAO operates.
My last question is that what's a good decision in on-chain governance? What you guys, looking back, I think what was a great decision in the history of your respective protocols? But I feel like we touched based on some major positives. So if anyone wants to add something, you're welcome to.
Let's take a question from from the community, from the audience instead.
Okay,
Maybe.
okay. I love that you're helping me co-moderate. Thank you. We're gonna go over 10 minutes because we have some fantastic questions. I would love to take Ben's question that how can people vote who hold funds in crypto banks, for example?
That's a hard question to answer. Using like a naive...
I was like, go for it. I'm not gonna answer that one.
Yeah, I mean, I can think of. I mean, you know, if the bank, if you think about this, right? Like, really, a bank is just holding, you know, some accounts, right? They're holding keys for you, right? So they could vote for you because they have power over your entire account. You know, you can imagine, you know, some, you know, centralized exchange just, you know, putting in something in their UI that would let you vote some percentage of the token for something, or, you know, put together, you know, I can imagine some other things like them having their own sort of mini DAO, or maybe not so decentralized AO, that, you know, lets, you know, all the members that are in that account, you know, under that account vote on behalf of the account. If it, yeah. But I mean, really, anytime you do this, if you have some sort of, you know, centralized place that's holding funds for you, you know, they have power over your account. So anything you do is going to have to go through them. That you've just added a level of trust. It's hard to do that in a decentralized way, but in a centralized, trusted way, then, you know, if the banks are interested in doing it, if they have enough demand from their customers, they could do it, you know, on their behalf.
I think that there is a way that this could be done, and it can't be done right now because of the way that most banks are structured, right? When you have a deposit with them, it's not just sitting in cold storage or something. They're actively using it, right? Lending it out and that sort of thing, and that would change your actual voting power. But it could be that the amount of the tokens that they haven't actually used, you know, in other market making activities, that the balance, because if you have the actual address, even if you don't have the private keys, then it's possible to delegate those votes to someone else. So even if you are incapable of you know, actively participating in the vote, you could still actually ask the bank to use whatever reserve that you actually do have ownership of, that's currently in the Ethereum address that the bank owns, to be used to vote a certain way. We don't have a way to do this in an automated way yet, but technologically, it's actually not that difficult to do.
So I have here a fun one, which like 20 years ahead, which is, yeah, it's just can't wrap my head around, but like curious what you guys say, that how votes made today impact the community in 20 years time. Do you think votes made today would be representative of the community 20 years down the line? I mean, we don't even have these protocols for 10 years yet, but curious to hear your take. Maybe someone dreamt about the future.
So I think it's important to remember that nothing that's ever done on these DAOs is generally concrete. We've already had a proposal, for example, once that was that had to do with how swap commissions are used on the platform, and then that was followed up with, you know, after some research, with essentially a proposal to retract the last proposal, right? And so there is a dynamic to it. It's not like once a proposal is passed, is that this is going to be the law forever. We don't use precedent or anything like you know, the legal system does. It's totally fine to revert to another situation. So I would say that whatever decisions are being passed right now only affect the immediate future. And then as the protocol progresses and as the community grows, it can cherry pick what worked and throw away the stuff that didn't work. And so over time, I'm hoping that things will just keep getting better and better. The bad decisions will be reversed and the good decisions will be kept. So I'd say 20 years from now, we're going to have a very different looking product. And a lot of the stuff that we're doing today, maybe some of it sticks and maybe some of it gets replaced with something better.
Thank you, Mark. So Sarah, I'm going to take your other question. Is there a governance algorithm that can recognize and reconcile all your governance structures?
I mean, would you mind if I just added something on to what Mark said there? Before we
Oh, absolutely. Please go for it.
Sorry. But I really want to say, like Mark said, like that there is no precedent, and like, you know, that, you know, we see that in, you know, on Polkadot too, where people, you know, argue about reverting previous things. But I think that even though there's no like technical precedent, like in a legal system, I think culturally, you know, we are seeing in
Sure.
Polkadot and Kusama, like, you know, some form of this precedence, right? It's seeping in, like, culturally on, like, and we see this, like, on what sort of things to do about, like, people with locked accounts and things like that. Even if, like, governance has power to do something, we see people, again, it's not as formal as, like, the legal system, but arguing, oh, we did not do this in case X, maybe we shouldn't do it here. So we see it, in people talking, off chain and in conversations, this precedence is seeping in. So I think it will have an impact.
Thank you very much. Would you like to take this one as well, the governance algorithms that can recognize and reconcile all your governance structures? Is there something like that out there?
I'm not sure I really know what that means. Like some sort of, like, meta governance protocol that can fit all kinds of governance in it.
Some kind of hybrid, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm not really sure I understand the question. But I mean, like, that's something like Polkadot that allows you to, rewrite the rules of the runtime, like, the entire rules of the blockchain would certainly, it's Turing complete. So you could do anything that can be computed. So that, but that's, I think that's, like, once you get to, like, well, of course, if there's a programming language, you can make anything that can be computed. It's, so yeah, I'm just really not sure what they're asking there, aside from, like, that's sort of a very generalized answer.
Okay, so then let's take two more questions. If you had an orange pill to convert the opinion of someone to help amplify the reach and impact of crypto and DeFi, who would you give that to? The orange pill. Who
Wouldn't use it. Right?
Okay.
It would be meaningless, right? To force someone to change their mind, it would be an empty accomplishment. I would rather that DeFi and blockchain technology basically continue as it is. Slowly, people start to realize the value, and it pulls users and value into itself. I think that that's a much more profound victory than orange pilling somebody.
Thank you very much for taking
that. I would still give it to the creators of what's that called? That video game that everyone plays?
World of Warcraft?
No, the other one where these youngsters make a lot of money now on it.
Minecraft?
Fortnite?
Yeah, there you go. I would put on a Fortnite. I'll tell these guys, like, stop that shit. Just create your own thing. Do only NFTs. Do it through engine, and like that. Yeah, they take over the whole financial digital world within the next 3 years. They have the power for it. I would give it to them. But maybe they're too corrupted by the VCs now. Who knows?
Let's take from the audience as last question from the one from Connor, who asks, what do you guys think about DACs, decentralized autonomous charities, such as Garrett Camp's EcoCoin? Will social enterprises become an integral feature of the future system?
Yeah, I don't know a huge amount about it, but it's a use case that I think sells itself. It is often concerning when you see some forensic accountants and stuff coming out and speaking against what certain charities are actually doing with the funds that their supporters have given them. So blockchain absolutely is a perfect use case to prevent that kind of corruption.
Yeah, I love it. I've been trying to help a lot of different projects, and I think it's, whenever I'm going to be able to maybe spend some more time not working only on SwissBorg, which is probably not going to happen for the next decade, I will definitely focus all my time and energy on that, because I think so that's at the end one of the best chain that you could provide is sending good karma and love to the ones that need it, and in the most transparent way will just boost that industry to to people that really say, okay, I am making that difference. I'm not giving 50% into advertisement or to high salary pay jobs in these different lovely countries we live in, but we're actually giving it to build a life for someone else. And I think so that's for sure.
Peace out. That's very positive closing thoughts. Maybe just like last question, so we finish at 7:15 p.m. What do you think is next for you as an individual in the ecosystem and for your projects? And if we can have a short and quick round here before we say bye.
Yeah, I mean, next for me is just more work. You know, I know exactly what is in our pipeline and how much needs to get done between, you know, now and any amount of time from now. I feel like I've got deadlines approaching every 15 minutes sometimes. So as an individual, you know, I'm just going to keep building, you know, new products for Bancor and trying to make the protocol as performant as it can possibly be. I think for the protocol itself, I see Bancor as becoming something like a you know, a DeFi staple, right? As supporting sort of the core of, like, you know, as forming a very strong foundation for DeFi forever. And I think the BNT token as well is likely to play a role there because of its shared liquidity with so many resources. It's likely to become something like an index token that has a you know, a value commensurate with the market overall. So you could see that if we do have many assets, maybe one day every cryptocurrency asset represented on Bancor with decent depths to the liquidity there, that it would no longer make sense to quote the price of things in US dollars, but should be quoted in terms of BNT instead, because you know that exchange pair exists for all assets. Way out in the future, I would also like to see this happen for things like tokenized energy, such as Energy Web Token, tokenized oil, tokenized gold, right? Basically get the entire economy into DeFi. And I think that Bancor will continue to serve, you know, the needs of an exchange between these things forever. So that's where I see us going.
Thanks, Mark.
I guess I'll go. So I think that in the near future, we're looking at the parachain launch for Kusama first, and then Polkadot. And here we're really going to see, so you know, not just the interesting aspects of these new parachains. I'm really specifically looking forward to how they have their own take on governance, because again, you know, they can produce their own rules for how, you know, governance takes place. Many of them have sort of copied or made slight modifications to sort of the default Polkadot rules, but some have some, you know, really interesting ones, ways of operating. And so not only am I looking forward to helping, you know, support these and talk about them and teach people about them, but also sort of, you know, learn about, you know, their pluses and minuses once we see them, you know, in the real world and not just in testnet form.
Thanks so much. Cyrus?
Yeah, I mean, you know, as I said, there's a lot to be done. The National Council, the first 50 seats will be elected tomorrow at 11 a.m. So that's going to be a big change. You know, and then we're going to very soon, I think so after tomorrow, we're going to release Ether yield for the best DeFi way to yield on Ether out of SwissBorg. So that's going to be really exciting. And if not, well, always try to be a very humble CEO and make sure that our community is happy and we're continuing to rock in the most fair and fun way.
Mark, Bill, and Cyrus, thanks so much. The painter and I are putting your hands together. Clap, clap, clap. Thanks for being here. Thanks for building. teaching and advancing this exciting community and area, and hope we can do this soon again, because this has been mind-blowing, and I wish you all the best to you. Hope to see you soon.
It's so
Thank
great. Thank you for
you.
sharing the platform.
Thank
Bye
you,
for
guys.
now. Bye everyone.
Bye-bye.